Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our MC for today's Cure Corridor event, CEO and President of the Flynn Foundation, Ms. Tammy McLeod.
So, good afternoon. My name is Tammy McLeod. I'm the President and CEO of the Flynn Foundation, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the 6th Annual Cure Corridor Luncheon here in Scottsdale, also known as Delivering the Promise. It's my honor today to serve as your Master of Ceremonies, and many of you may know that the Flynn Foundation made a strong commitment about 20 years ago to the biosciences industry and the sector here in Arizona. We feel that that has a very strong intersection with the other work that we do, which is in the arts and sciences, the Flynn Scholars Program, and the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership. Dr. Robert Flynn was a well-known cardiologist, and he and his wife Irene, a generous philanthropist, founded our foundation in 1965. They kept the mission simple, but very purposeful, and we still retain that same mission today, which is to improve the quality of life in Arizona. So I'd like to turn your attention to the screen for a quick video. Hi friends, I'm Tammy McLeod, President and CEO of the Flynn Foundation. I'm still excited when I say those words. I've told many people since I started here in October of 2017 that this is my dream job, and I'd like to tell you why and what's in store for us here at the Flynn Foundation. In my previous role with Arizona's largest public utility, I focused a lot on economic development and what builds vibrant communities. Much of that work was focused on those individual attributes that contribute to a community's well-being. The Flynn Foundation's mission has that type of holistic expansiveness to improve the quality of life in Arizona to benefit future generations. Across this state, many people know Flynn because of just one of our program areas. Parents, students, and teachers often discover us because of the Flynn Scholarship, one of the most prestigious in the country. Individuals who are interested in investing in community service at the state level often find us through the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership. Flynn also makes a strong contribution in the arts through our initiative for financial and creative health to arts and culture organizations throughout the state. And the main thrust of our work has been that of the biosciences, where doctors, researchers, and universities come together to fuel the future of our state. Individually, each one of these programs testifies to our benefactors, Dr. and Mrs. Flynn, who love this state and pledge their wealth to its future. But these programs together, that's where the greatest impact can occur, where these programs intertwine and work together to address some of Arizona's most significant challenges. That's what energizes me about the work ahead for the Flynn Foundation. This year, as we engage in a strategic planning process, we're concentrating not only on how to enhance each of our programs, but how to bring them into closer alignment for the benefit of every Arizonan. And I do mean every. We have a statewide mandate after all. So today, we recruit Flynn Scholars and Flynn Brown Fellows from Tempe and Tucson, but also from Globe and Ganado. I believe that every one of our programs can touch every part of our state. The path forward for Arizona begins with us embracing our incredible diversity of people, of landscape, and of industry, and then working to collaborate on broadly shared progress. We all know that the world is more complex and competition more intense than ever before, but together we have so much potential. As they say, out of many, one. So for those of you who've had to experience something like that before, it's really hard to watch yourself on a video. But the Flynn Foundation is really honored to be part of today's Cure Corridor event. Healthcare and the life sciences are vital industries inside the city of Scottsdale, and you'll learn more about that with our upcoming speakers. I'm hoping that you'll leave here today energized about the work that's taking place in our community. And here with me today to kick off this event officially is our mayor, Mayor Lane.
Well, thank you, Tammy. And it really is great to have you all here for sure, and I also want to welcome you to the 6th Annual Cure Corridor. Having been a member of the Flynn Foundation Steering Committee for the past 10 years, it is really a very uniquely tied together effort here with regard to the city of Scottsdale specifically, and of course with the Flynn Foundation's efforts on the overall. You know, when I started this endeavor in 2012, my goal was to connect and enhance our bio-life science community. And it is great to be back with you to celebrate another amazing growth and another amazing year of growth and innovation taking place within the industry right here in Scottsdale. We have an impressive lineup of speakers, but first I want to recognize my council colleagues who are joining us here today. Beginning with our council members are Suzanne Clapp, Linda Milhaven, Virginia Cordy, Kathy Littlefield, David Smith, and Vice Mayor Guy Phillips. And if you could stand just to be recognized. Appreciate you being here, all of you. Thank you. And of course, thank you to our partners who helped make this event possible. Scottsdale Business Development Forum, who has championed the Cure Corridor since day one, and the Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce, who have been immense help again this year. For the 4th year in a row, I am delighted to announce our title sponsor, Cigna, this year's partner in the Cure Salt River Project, our keynote sponsor, Honor Health. I'd like to give a hand for each of those for their participation. And our other sponsors, certainly we very much appreciate all of the help that they've given to us in this endeavor. And that's Honor Health Foundation, the Mayo Clinic, Arizona Bank and Trust, Scottsdale Industrial Development Authority, APS, Systems Imagination, RBC Wealth Management, Mark Duane, Ropar Closes, Arizona Bioindustries Association, and Primus Pharmaceuticals, and Barry Riddell. Thank you for your generous support of the Cure Corridor and your continued commitment to our community. Before I share a few thoughts on the importance of the Cure Corridor, I'm excited to share with you a demonstrative, rapid-fire video describing the dynamic, interconnected, and multifaceted bio-life science and biomedical culture here in Scottsdale. I hope that demonstrates a little bit of the energy that we feel about this industry and what's going on here in Scottsdale and really, frankly, across the entire state. But as you saw in the video, the Cure Corridor is much more than a geographical location. It's a place for clinical trials, patient care deliveries, cutting-edge research, and manufacturing of life-saving pharmaceuticals, all leading to improved patient care and future cures. Healthcare jobs in Scottsdale are growing at a rate twice the national average, as you may have just seen. Went by pretty quickly, but nevertheless, you may have seen that. And 3 of the city's top 5 employers are Honor Health, CVS Health, and the Mayo Clinic. That is somewhat of a departure from where we were maybe even as recently as 2007, for sure, but even as recently as maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Obviously, the industry is a positive economic story for us here. It will be for a long time to come due to outstanding educational partners. For example, ASU and the Mayo School of Medicine partnered to allow students to earn a master's degree in science of healthcare delivery at the same time as their MD right here in Scottsdale. We also have Spear Education offering world-class instruction in the field of dentistry and dental technology. Scottsdale Community College is broadening their nursing and bioscience-related programs, and Scottsdale Unified Public School and Honor Health are engaged in a terrific partnership to prepare the next generation of healthcare innovators. There is so much good news, and I could go on about the growth of our hospitals, as recently reported in the Phoenix Business Journal, or how for the last 5 years, 1/3 of all Metro Phoenix venture capital investments in healthcare startups were Scottsdale-based companies, or advanced oncology breakthroughs and translational genomic studies, bioinformatics, and much more. But we have a great lineup of speakers today, including our keynote, Stephanie Domas, who will discuss cybersecurity in the healthcare industry, a topic I find fascinating, and I think you will too.
For those of you who aren't familiar with the rapid fire session, it is the opportunity to learn something in a very short period of time. The rules are pretty simple. They get 5 minutes and fast slides. And so it's a very fun, rapid way of conveying information to a group. Our first speaker today, and I'll give a rapid bio, has made outstanding contributions here to the Cure Corridor. Dr. Joseph Blattman is the Chief Science Officer for Gemnio Biosciences, and he's also an Associate Professor of Immunology, and get this, at the Center for Immunotherapy, Vaccination, and Virotherapy in the Biodesign Institute at the School of Life Sciences at ASU. Dr. Blattman has authored more than 40 peer-reviewed publications, and he's been awarded over $16 million in research in grants for things that include safer and more effective immunotherapies to treat diseases. One of the reasons that I'm so pleased to introduce him today is that he is one of the 2018 Flynn Bioscience Entrepreneurs. So please help me welcome to the stage for his 5-minute rapid fire, Dr. Joe Blattman.
Thank you. I'll try and be inspirational, but we know that doesn't always work out. So when you think about the future of curing cancer, really what you have to deal with is the problem that cancer is not one thing anymore. By the time you can detect cancer, it has evolved into millions of different types of cells. And so the future of cancer therapy and immunotherapy is really understanding at the single cell level, what are the differences in all of the different cells that you have there. So this work really is based on things that were developed in my laboratory at ASU. Represents about $3 million in funding over 5 years. Gemnio Bioscience is the spin-out of this research program, has the exclusive global license to the single-cell genomics technology that I'll describe, and that is covered by 1 issued patent and 1 provisional patent that's in the works right now. What this really has to do with, though, is single-cell analysis and the problems that are currently limiting that field. And if you think about that, that's a $1 billion market by 2021 with a huge annual growth rate. And really the downstream parts of that are immense in both immunotherapy, chemotherapy, and virotherapy. So currently, we're at the point where we have a we're at the development of a minimal viable product for sending out, and I think with recent developments this morning, we're really close to that goal. And we have both seed round funding and are in the process of Series A round funding. And really, if we get down to what are the limitations of single-cell analysis, the main limitation is throughput and cost. You can't do enough cells to see the rare populations that are going to come back and in cancer kill you. And so we wanted to develop an approach in my laboratory that we could do single-cell profiling of 2 or more genes. It had to be high efficiency. Current single-cell technologies are at the very max 50%, but closer to usually to 1% efficiency. It had to have high throughput, so you have to do millions of cells at a time. Current single-cell approaches can do thousands to tens of thousands. That's simply not high enough throughput. And it has to be low cost. If you're going to do millions of cells, you can't be doing $1 a cell, which is the current cost of single-cell sequencing. So when we combined all of those things, we realized what you needed was a molecular approach. Single-cell analysis without single-cell sorting. And the only way to do that is really something sort of Star Trek-y, where you take something that you design that's very small and put it into cells, capture the genes that you're interested in, and then pull it out and link them by other approaches. So that's the idea. We have a nanochip. And this is technology that was developed by one of our partners at the Biodesign Institute at ASU. And these are tiny DNA molecules that you fold into shapes that you want, and you can change that by adding functional groups. In our case, adding groups where we can capture gene sequences within the cell. So inside the cell, you capture the sequences, you burst the cells open, and then you recover those nanochips. And what you're doing then is just sequencing them. Each chip has a unique barcode that is added to those sequences, and so if you match up the barcodes, you know which sequences came from the same cell. Now, obviously, this has huge implications for the immune system, both in analysis of T cells, which you need to know 2 genes at the same time, or B cells, where we get our antibodies from. You need to know 2 genes at the same time from each cell. It also has huge implications for cancer, so you can start matching up cancer mutations from the same cell. There are many companies that can't do that really currently, and this is a huge technology to advance that. It also has implications for analysis of your microbiome. Many of you probably know that your microbiome has a huge influence on both your immune system and your cancer prognosis. So with those, we really have a technology that outcompetes current single-cell analysis approaches by many orders of magnitude. First, it doesn't require single-cell sorting, so you save money on investing in a controller, which I don't know if you've ever looked at these, but this is $100,000. It has high efficiency, low cost, and high throughput. We've now assembled a team that's execution ready to move this project forward. And I just want to leave you with the last slide of how do you get a whole picture of your cancer? Current single-cell analysis approaches give you snapshots of a few cells. Bulk sequencing gives you 1 gene, so you can't do all of it. We've developed something that gives you multiple genes at high throughput to get the whole picture. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. As we continue our rapid fire session, our next speaker, here's another rapid bio. David Richardson is a founding member of Biosyntagma, also located here in Scottsdale. He has experience in research and development and has helped launch multiple software packages used by the government to secure and control their facilities. During his transition to healthcare, he engineered orthopedic solutions, including surgical instruments, knee implant hardware, and a complete hip replacement system under FDA and ISO certified design. He then moved into cancer research as an engineer, fabricating, and wait for this, a microfluidic system capable of investigating microtumor spheroids at a single cell level. He is also a Flynn bioscience entrepreneur. Please welcome David Richardson.
there has never been a better time than today to have cancer. Thanks to advances in immunotherapies and precision medicines, they've had great success. But notice I said precision medicines and not personalized medicine. Frankly, personalized medicine has been a buzzword that hasn't really delivered on the promise. But rather than under-delivering on the promise, people have settled for changing the scope and changing the words used and the goals. And so there's a lot of talk about precision medicines. And just to give you a state of where precision medicines are, in 2017, about $45 billion was spent on what could be considered precision medicines. But much like a person becomes resistant to antibiotics, a cancer patient becomes resistant to their treatments. And so especially in metastatic cancer patients, nearly every single person who receives one of these treatments will develop resistance to it, which means we're spending $45 billion a year on treatments we expect patients to become resistant to. And this is a huge expense for payers. So basically when someone gets a cancer biopsy taken and it's initially sent for a diagnosis, it may go through an initial test, but then to be prescribed a precision medicine, it goes through something called a companion diagnostic. And each of these steps in that process is a payment by a payer. And then if they pass all of these tests, they're going to be matched to precision medicine. But what we already know is that they're going to become resistant to it, and then this cycle starts over again and it's a loop. My question is this a sustainable future for cancer treatment, especially considering the companion diagnostics come out almost every day? There's news about a new one coming out and being launched. So what should happen is that what if you could combine all of this into one step, one test that prescribes a combination of drugs that's right for that patient that prevents resistance? To do that, you need more information. So we developed a platform called the molecular fingerprint that provides that information. But it's a lot like Google Maps, but instead of zooming in on an address or a house, you're looking at mapping an actual tumor inside a patient and looking at the types of cancer cells and genetic information like mutations. So we've partnered with 2 diagnostic companies, and over this summer we produced some information, some data in a study that actually shows that our maps are more accurate and precise than standard methods. So what's the future look like? The future looks like, what if you could take one test and prescribe a combination of drugs to a patient that gives them exactly what they need? The cure for cancer is not going to be a single pill, it's going to be a plan for how to treat this patient at once to prevent acquired drug resistance and prevent relapse. So using our molecular fingerprint to produce this information, we're now building out a data science pipeline using machine learning and predictive analytics to classify patients into responder or non-responder categories so that we can make predictions about what exactly they need. Because the future of a sustainable healthcare system is going to be one test with one payment and one plan for the patient. Thank you.
Are you getting inspired? So now I have the pleasure of introducing today's keynote speaker. Stephanie Domas is Vice President of Research and Development at MedSec, where she leads the development and business strategy for products and services. Those products and services are aimed towards addressing cybersecurity of medical devices in healthcare. And at 31 years old, Domas is widely recognized as one of the leading experts in healthcare cybersecurity in the nation, having contributed toward national security guidance and standards for medical devices. She's authored dozens of industry articles and presented at a number of major conferences, including the Cure Corridor. Stephanie is a resident of Columbus, Ohio, which is why she told me it was warm today. But she was previously director of product development at Battelle. She leverages her strong relationships with medical device manufacturers when working with hospitals on MedScan implementations. In her role at MedSec, she facilitates collaboration between manufacturers and hospitals and helps them work through pain points on both sides. She's a member of several medical device cybersecurity standard working groups, a registered professional engineer, and also a certified ethical hacker. She has given a TEDx talk on medical product security, So please help me welcome to the stage Stephanie Domas.
Okay, so the key thing here is that in my career, I work with both medical device manufacturers and hospitals in addressing cybersecurity for medical devices. So that gives me this really unique perspective because I get to work on kind of both sides of this proverbial fence of cybersecurity on kind of the front end of healthcare and on the actual delivery side of healthcare. So before I talk about healthcare cybersecurity, I actually want to do some level setting of what I mean by cybersecurity. It's one of those buzzwords that captures headlines. It's always thrown around in the media. But what does it actually mean? A lot of people jump to the conclusion or the assumption that it's associated with privacy, or privacy is kind of the main facet of cybersecurity. So privacy is a piece of cybersecurity, but it's actually a very small piece of it. So typically, at least for me, when I'm talking about cybersecurity, I'm talking about what we call the CIA triad: the confidentiality, the availability, and the integrity of a system or a piece of data. So by confidentiality, we mean that people should only have access to the data or pieces of functionality that they should, and that it should be restricted to those who shouldn't have access to it. Availability is the idea that if you need a piece of data or you need a piece of functionality, that it is there and it is ready and available for you to use when you should need it. And integrity is the idea that whether or not something is trustworthy, is a piece of data something that I can trust, that it is a true representation, it hasn't been modified from its original intent, and from a functionality standpoint, is it actually still working or behaving the way that it was intended to? So the idea is that there's no one-size-fits-all for cybersecurity. For every piece of data, every piece of functionality you look at, the CIA triad is typically different, and that's why cybersecurity, among many reasons, is very difficult. So take, for example, in a healthcare setting, a digital thermometer. A digital thermometer, the confidentiality of it, not that important. For the most part, you're not really trying to protect what somebody's temperature is. If somebody walks by and sees my temperature, I'm not that concerned about it. So confidentiality, not a big deal. Availability, probably not also a big deal. If a nurse were to grab a digital thermometer, try to turn it on and it didn't work, they're going to go to the closet where there's probably 1,000 more of them and simply grab another one. So availability is not something you want to overlook, but it's also not critical. Integrity, on the other hand, if that thermometer is giving the wrong temperature reading in a healthcare setting, there's a very real possibility that somebody's care will be altered. They may get the wrong treatment, or they may not get any treatment because their temperature looks correct. So the CIA, for something like a digital thermometer, is actually very high on an integrity need and actually pretty low on confidentiality and availability. But then you take something like an X-ray machine. So now you're talking about something where the confidentiality is very high on that. The need for confidentiality, it protects a lot of patient health information, critical information about that patient, about their health, just about them in general is on that machine. So on an X-ray machine, confidentiality is very high. The availability kind of depends on the environment. So if you're in a healthcare system where you may have 10 of these in rooms next to each other, maybe the availability of one in particular is not critical. But if you're a smaller healthcare system and your X-ray machine goes down, and you may be the only hospital in 100 miles that has an X-ray machine, the availability of that machine actually becomes critical. And integrity is absolutely critical in something like an X-ray machine, both from a data standpoint, thinking about the fact that if it misrepresents the X-ray or the patient data that it has, somebody's going to get the wrong care. But also from a functionality standpoint, if somebody has tampered with the way that that machine works, then you could actually hurt people. So the CIA, the idea is that the CIA, for every single piece of functionality or data, is different. And that is one of the big challenges in cybersecurity, is there's no one size fits all. So now coming to healthcare. So why am I talking about cybersecurity in healthcare? So according to one study that came out pretty recently, healthcare accounted for 37% of all the data breaches that happened in Q3 of this year. So I'm not just talking about some science fiction thing that we need to worry about 5 years from now, or I'm trying to warn us that we need to start preparing ourselves. This is already happening. Healthcare is being targeted, and unfortunately, quite a lot. So 37% was the highest industry in that report that was affected by data breaches. So, actually, let me go back one. So before I introduce this topic, one of the big things you kind of ask yourself is, okay, cybersecurity and healthcare, what does that actually look like? What are attackers doing? What is this 37% of cyber breaches actually look like? So there's a couple main areas where this happens that are not healthcare specific. So I want to touch on them because they are relevant, but these are things that affect every industry out there. It's not just healthcare specific. So the first one is something called ransomware. So ransomware grabs a lot of media headlines because it's just kind of a cool, flashy thing. But the idea of ransomware is that a piece of malicious code has gotten itself into your network, and the whole point of ransomware is to spread throughout the network, encrypting or locking down the files that you need access to, and then it essentially holds them ransom for money. It's typically in the tens of thousands of dollars to basically unlock your files and get access to them. So ransomware is absolutely very prevalent in healthcare, but it's not a healthcare specific problem. Every industry out there is getting hit by ransomware right now. And it's unfortunate because we've really seen a ramp up of ransomware in healthcare because a few years ago, one of the first sort of publicly seen kind of industry-wide ransomware attacks that worked, it got a lot of media attention because it locked down the hospital. They were unable to perform patient care, so the hospital decided to pay the ransom. And because it was kind of the first of its kind, it got a tremendous amount of media attention, which had the negative side effect of getting a lot of bad guys who weren't necessarily thinking about targeting healthcare to start thinking about targeting healthcare, because they now realized, well, here's an industry that kind of looks ripe for the taking. And by the way, the function that they perform is so critical that they will pay the ransom because they need to get that hospital back up and running. Not having access to their data for days is simply not an option in a healthcare setting. So ransomware is hitting healthcare, but it's not a healthcare specific threat. The other one that makes up a tremendous number of these breaches is email phishing. So email phishing is the idea that a malicious attacker crafts an email that they will send to you that either has a link in it or a file that they will try to get you to open. And the idea with this is that if they can get you to click on that link or open that file, what you've effectively done is given their malicious code permission to run on your computer. Until you do that action, that email, even though it may be loaded with malicious code, it can't actually affect your computer. You have to be that launching point. So email phishing is very successful because people are almost always the weakest link. So you will get people who will click on suspicious links, they will open suspicious files. And while this is plaguing healthcare, it is not specific to healthcare. Every industry suffers from this. So I wanted to mention it, but it's not what I'm going to focus on, because what I'd rather talk about is the stuff that is actually unique to healthcare. So cybersecurity is particularly difficult in healthcare because we have so much uniqueness. So what do I mean by that? So I mean things patient harm and patient data. These are the two things that are very unique in the healthcare setting that make us particularly targetable by attackers, and it's one of the reasons that we see so many of those breaches happen in the healthcare space. Healthcare is in fact being targeted. So let's talk about patient data first. So this was supposed to be a fancy graphic that loaded one at a time, but my sweet graphic didn't load. So you're supposed to just be able to see patient record first. So what do I mean by patient data? So the thing that attackers are going after, you have to keep in mind that the thing they really want is monetizable data. The reason that previously the healthcare sector was targeted was because credit card numbers used to be very valuable. It used to be that credit card numbers were worth $10, $15 a credit card number. But now the modern going rate is about $2 per credit card number. If you were to steal credit card numbers, that's about how much you'd get per credit card number. A healthcare patient record right now is going for anywhere from $10 to $20 on the dark web, the black market. So this has become a new target for attackers who simply want to monetize things. So why is it that they're going after patient health records? So a patient health record, it has things like your name. That's not that interesting. It has your billing information. So this often does, in fact, include your credit card information. So when they get your health record, not only do they get your financial credit card information, but they're getting so much more. But where it starts to get juicier is things like your social security number. So every hospital asks for it every time you go to a patient center, every time you get lab tests done, they need your social security number because it's needed to run insurance and for other reasons. So the social security number, now you're starting to get real interesting to attackers. Now you're starting to talk full-blown identity theft. And then you plug in the fact that it's also got things like your home address, sometimes the address of your employer, given where your insurance comes from. So now, just that right side of that picture, you're talking information that I am unable to change easily. When an attacker gets a hold of my credit card number, it has become so easy for me to call that company and say, I don't recognize these charges, shut down my card. And they will typically reverse those charges. So the attacker who bought my credit card number doesn't benefit at all. So attackers, when they buy credit card numbers, they expect a large portion of them to be useless to them. They will get canceled before they actually benefit any. But this kind of information, I can tell you right now, I am going through the process of getting a new mortgage for a new house. I have not set foot physically in the bank that is going to be issuing my loan. Every single thing I have done has been online, and I can tell you that pretty much all of it is that information. If somebody knew this about me, they could have gotten the same mortgage in my name. So that's why this information is valuable, but then it goes even further than that. So you've also got things like health insurance information. Believe it or not, there's a big market out there for people who want to get health care on somebody else's insurance. They want to fill high-priced narcotic prescriptions on somebody else's health insurance. So there is a market for selling simply health insurance information that you know is valid. The next one is just your actual medical data, so information about treatments you've received. This one, it doesn't seem quite so obvious, but there's actually a lot of uses for this. So there are a number of countries, the United States included, for example, who our immigration process, our green card immigration process, requires a clean X-ray scan to be able to be granted admission into the United States for immigration. So there is a market right now for clean X-rays of chest, lungs. You ask yourself, if you were trying to immigrate to the United States and the thing keeping you from doing that was a clean chest X-ray, how many thousands of dollars would you be willing to spend to get that? The answer is probably a lot. That's the thing keeping you from where you want to go. So there's all this other kind of peripheral side effects of our medical data that it's actually hard to imagine even existed. The X-ray one actually really surprised me when I first heard about it. So you ask yourself, all right, I'm telling you this information is valuable, but is this actually happening? Are attackers really going after these electronic health records? So in 2017, healthcare averaged 1 breach per day for the entire year, totaling 506 million healthcare patient records stolen just in the United States alone last year. So this is absolutely already happening. Electronic health records are being targeted because they are so valuable. So the other one I mentioned was patient harm. So patient data and patient harm really are the two things that make healthcare really unique. And I don't want to overlook patient harm, and as a tech person, I will be the first to tell you it's absolutely possible. From a technical standpoint, we could absolutely hurt people in hospitals with cyber attacks. The reason you don't see that happening, though, is you have to keep in mind what's the motivation for somebody to do that. Most of your malicious cyber attackers out there are looking for things to monetize. They want money. Aside from a particularly high-profile person who maybe you could ransom their health treatment, for the most part, there's not easy ways to monetize patient harm through a cyber attack in healthcare. So this one gets a lot of media attention, gets a lot of sensationalism, but at the end of the day, there's just not as much motivation. And at the end of the day, it sounds kind of silly saying this, but there are easier ways to hurt people. Even as much as I know about cybersecurity, if I wanted to cause mass harm to people, I still wouldn't try to do it through attacking a healthcare system. There are easier ways to hurt people. So maybe that makes us lucky that we haven't gotten an attack trying to hurt people, but at the end of the day, There's easier ways to do it other than attacking healthcare, and there's not a good way to monetize it. So patient harm is absolutely a thing. It is possible. We just don't see it happening right now, and I hope that, honestly, we never do. So I'm going to talk to you now about the defensive side of things. So I kind of introduced sort of where we're at, kind of the things that are plaguing us. So in the healthcare space, our big thing is how do we defend against this? So the main things like the ransomware, the email phishing, I mentioned they're really not specific to healthcare. So it's not that the problem is solved, but there are a lot of industry best practices out there for how to address those kinds of problems and those challenges. There are tools, there's a lot of just professional industry knowledge. So what I want to talk to you more about is where I see that there is actually a big gap in defenses where it's unique to healthcare, and I don't see enough work being done there. So what that is the medical devices. So I work with a lot of hospital systems, and I can tell you from the hospital systems that I work with, on average, the connected medical devices represent 15 to 20% of that hospital's endpoints. So that means if you looked at all of the internet-connected things in that healthcare system, all of their billing systems, their patient intake systems, their HR systems, their electronic health record servers, 15 to 20% of the things on a hospital network are actually medical devices. That is a huge portion of the network that is often going kind of unlooked at. So again, you ask yourself, all right, well, maybe it represents a fifth of my network, but are attackers actually going after them? Is there really an urgency for me to start trying to protect these? So in 2017, there was a study done where advanced monitoring tools were set up in 60 hospitals, specifically tracking high-profile devices in those hospitals. So things like PACS systems, imaging systems, X-ray systems, the ones that house a lot of patient data, since we know those are the ones attackers are going after. And in the 60 hospitals where advanced monitoring was put around those devices, all 60 hospitals, it was found that attackers were actually targeting those devices. In these cases, those devices had been set up with fake patient data because they knew they were being studied. So when we saw attackers get into those devices, went ahead and let them do what they were doing so you could see, well, what are they looking for? And hands down, they were almost always trying to copy that fake patient data off of those systems. So this is absolutely happening. Attackers know and are targeting these medical devices that are sitting on networks because they want that patient data. And those high-profile devices, they house a lot of patient data on them, but they are also typically the devices that are connected to the electronic health records servers. So you're also talking that if they can get into that device, they can talk to the main electronic health record and get all of the records. So those devices are absolutely being targeted and attacked. So I also work with a lot of med device manufacturers, and I can tell you confidently that medical devices are getting more secure. There are a number of good manufacturers out there who are trying really hard to make more secure med devices. But I will also be the first to tell you that there is no such thing as a secure device, not just a secure medical device. In general, there is no such thing as a secure device. Security will always be one of those arms races. There is no winning at security. So we can make devices more secure, but understand that doesn't mean we have to stop protecting them. There is no such thing as a secure device. But let's talk about the bigger elephant in the room, legacy devices. So legacy devices will take years to replace. If I were to ask all of the healthcare systems in this room if they had devices on their network and then still in use in their hospitals that were 10 years, 15 years, even 20 years old, I guarantee you every single one of them would say yes, and I even see a lot of heads bobbing over here. And that's not a bad thing. For the most part, those devices were designed with that in mind. They were designed to last a really long time and serve their clinical purpose. The problem is that when they were designed, cybersecurity was not front of mind. People did not think about cybersecurity in all of the testing that they did for these devices. So it's not feasible for a number of reasons to simply wipe out and replace all the legacy devices. It doesn't make sense. They're still serving their clinical function. We just have to basically defend them and understand that those legacy devices that weren't designed with security in mind are going to take decades to kind of weed out of the system. So the legacy devices and protecting them is actually a huge undertaking right now. Also, the number of connected medical devices is growing. A few years ago, the general number was that of new medical devices being purchased by healthcare systems, about 25% of those new devices were connectable to the internet. So this is just the new devices that hospitals are purchasing. In the past year, I've re-asked a lot of the hospitals I work with, what's the new numbers you're seeing? And now those numbers are starting to look more like 40%. So about 40% of new medical devices being purchased in healthcare systems now connect to the internet. So this problem is going to just keep growing. It's not going to be long before med devices represent over a quarter of the endpoints in a healthcare system. So why do I care? And why do the current solutions not matter? Why did I say this was a gap in our defense systems right now? So every healthcare system has a lot of cool tools. They have a lot of cool cyber IT security teams. And the problem is all of the cool tools you have and all of your IT security training that your staff has been through doesn't really work for medical devices. So there's a couple reasons for that. The tools, on the tool side, for the most part, most modern security tools are simply too aggressive for medical devices. The way a lot of those tools work is they essentially will kind of send kind of a digital ping or a digital poke out to a device to kind of test it and ask it some basic information about itself. It may ask it what versions of stuff it's running so it can tell if it's vulnerable to new cyber attacks. It may actually try some benign versions of attacks to see if it works on that device, all to give a report back to the hospital saying, hey, these devices are vulnerable. The problem is those legacy devices were never designed with that in mind. When you do that kind of testing on a commodity system, like a Windows-based system, it was absolutely designed with that in mind. You would not even notice if you were on that system that that testing was being done. Med devices weren't designed with that in mind, and it's proven several times that if those scans happen on med devices, particularly older ones, they can shut down, they'll reboot, they'll start behaving erratically, and in a clinical setting, that's simply not okay. So what you find is a lot of healthcare systems are forced to skip medical devices with their traditional tools. They have kind of a black area where they just tell the tools not to go there. The other piece of it is that traditionally, security of the devices, security of your traditional endpoints in a network has fallen to that IT security team. So that makes sense for them. They've been trained on how you secure traditional IT products. But they don't typically understand clinical workflows, and they don't typically have a say in how med devices are set up. Medical devices are typically run by hospital clinical engineering teams. Those clinical engineering teams know a tremendous amount about how you set up a device to provide its clinical function, how it behaves in a clinical workflow. Clinical engineers are not trained in cybersecurity. So while new and more secure med devices are being turned out by manufacturers, what you find is a lot of the security features are not being turned on because the clinical engineers that are setting up these products, they don't understand security. They don't know what features to turn on. They don't know how to configure the security on these devices. So you've got kind of this big gap missing where you've got clinical engineers, you've got IT security, and then you've got these med devices sitting in the middle where nobody quite has kind of purview of both sides of it. So that's where this kind of comes in. So healthcare cybersecurity, specifically of the medical devices, is both a people and a parts problem. So it's a parts problem in the sense that I told you your traditional security tools don't work against med devices. But there are tools being developed out there that are medical device specific. They were specifically designed with the idea that you can't prod or poke at these med devices, that if you cause a med device to misbehave, that is simply unacceptable. So there are no tools out there that are specifically designed for medical devices. So that's kind of the parts piece of it. But the people piece of it is still just as critical. If you don't have people who understand clinical workflows and cybersecurity at the same time, you're still not going to get devices that are set up with the security settings turned on. But you're also not going to get people who understand how to run those tools. So you buy fancy tools that are meant for cybersecurity of medical devices, but you still have to have somebody who can look at the data coming out of that and understand how you react to that. How do I handle this? A bunch of the traditional tools, if they see a device misbehaving, the traditional IT security mindset is typically to isolate that device, digitally isolate it. If I see a device misbehaving suspiciously, I digitally isolate it on the network. In a med device that may rely on that connection to provide clinical care, you cannot digitally isolate it because you don't know what will happen. If I see a med device misbehaving on the network and I suddenly take it off the network as a security precaution, what if it crashes mid-surgery because I did that? So that people piece is important too. You have to have people who understand how these med devices work in a clinical workflow, but understand security enough to know how they handle the information coming out of these tools. And that's where the awareness piece comes in. So part of it's an awareness like what I'm doing. I spend a lot of time speaking to really great people, trying to spread awareness about this problem, but it also comes from internal awareness. A lot of healthcare industry doesn't understand that internally they need to be looking at the med devices. So I have the privilege of sitting on the cybersecurity board for a hospital, and part of my role, well, the entirety of my role is being that advocate for medical device security at that corporate C-suite level. But I can tell you a number of hospitals that I talk to or I work with don't have that kind of an advocate. So the issue of medical device cybersecurity, even though it represents a fifth of your network endpoints, and possibly more depending on the hospital, that device goes unfunded and unrecognized at those C-suite levels, where cybersecurity has become a common topic, yet something like cybersecurity of the medical devices hasn't quite permeated to that level. So we need more awareness. So like most keynotes, my whole purpose up here is a call to arms. So what I want is for everyone in this room, regardless of what role you play in the healthcare space or regardless of what role you play even outside the healthcare space, is to really ask yourself, in the environments you work in, are you doing enough to protect patient health, to protect patient data, and protect patient harm? There are a number of great people, myself included, who have dedicated our professional lives to making it so that we continue to live in a world where people get the health treatment that they need in a manner they can trust. And my goal is that I hope all of you will help join me on that. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Please join me in giving all of our speakers and Tammy McLeod a round of applause, please, again. And if I could ask you both to come back up here for just a moment, I'd like to present you with a token of our appreciation for you being here and participating at the level you have. You two. The two who just mentioned. Thank you so much. Well, thank you again for your interest in the Cure Corridor, and I hope you intend to stay engaged. And on your way out, you'll see some brochures that showcase more about what's happening in Scottsdale, so you don't forget to grab one of those as you leave, please. We're creating quarterly programs and media events related to the Cure Corridor, and you will be hearing much more from us on the topic. Also, you'll be getting an email from our Economic Development Department after this event with links to additional information, plus a survey. If you could give us a moment of your time to fill out that survey so that we know what you've enjoyed and what we might be able to improve on for next year. And finally, thank you again for the sponsors, Scottsdale Area Chamber of Commerce, the city's economic development team, and the Scottsdale Video Crew, as well as my staff for all your work in making today possible.